You're listening to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Big John McCarthy has witnessed the best that the UFC had to offer.
That is it! Game, set, match! We have a new champion!
Your backstage pass to the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports. Only on the Ignotainment Media Network.
Let's get it on!
Hey everyone, welcome to the premiere episode of Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and me, Sean Wheelock. Every week on this podcast, John and I will give you an inside look at MMA and combat sports, always separating fact from fiction. On this week's program, we'll be discussing the dominant victories from this past weekend of both Ronda Rousey and Cyborg, and what it will take to make a fight between these two superstars of women's MMA. We'll also talk about Liam McGary's win over Emmanuel Newton this past Friday, which gave McGary Bellator's light heavyweight world title and has put a big focus on the judging in that fight. And we'll revisit the eye poke in last Saturday's Kid Yamamoto versus Roman Salazar UFC bout, which John refereed and ruled a no contest. Plus, as we'll do every week here on Let's Get It On, John will answer your questions. Ask away via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. That's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Remember that you can download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. John, a very big weekend for you, brother. It was a big Friday for me. I just about lost my voice. It's not quite back here yet. It's not good to be sick when you're a commentator, but I fought through it. Thankfully, you weren't sick. You had Bellator on Friday with me. And then on Saturday, you flew cross-country from Hartford, Connecticut to Los Angeles for the UFC. You had the UFC show not only in LA, but you had the main event, Ronda Rousey's 14-second submission win over Zingano. That was just simply a steamroller-like performance.
Yeah, my God, you look at it and you can never, contemplate how good somebody is until you look at someone like Ronda and what she's done in all of her fights. And, you look at Zingano. Kat is a phenomenal fighter. This girl has shown every element that you ask of, if you're a trainer and you want to work with someone, she shows it all. She's got a work ethic that's fantastic. She's got incredible skills. She's got incredible heart because she has shown in her fights when she has been down in fights, she does not break. She's resilient. She comes back. She keeps moving forward. She's just, she's an undefeated fighter going into that fight. She's absolutely one of the best women at 135 pounds there is in the world. And, I look at the fight now and I go back and, thinking about it and, talking about, what people were thinking. And, a lot of people were saying Kat was a slow starter and Ronda's a fast starter. So how's that going to be? And I think Kat went out there to prove, look, and I'm not going to start slow. I'm going to go after her. And she did. And I give her credit for going after her. I think, you know what? That shows the heart of a champion. She went after her. Ronda did a beautiful maneuver off of it to change that energy and all of that strength that came at her. She did what she does best. She used it to her advantage, ends up on top. Kat extends her arm to try to grab a hold of her. And with what Ronda did to set up that straight arm lock, it's, when you talk about poetry in motion, people have no idea how smooth that is. It's incredible to me to watch somebody that good because, I've been doing this a long time too. And I look at her and I said, when the fight, ended, I said, man, it sucks when I see a girl that makes me look so bad because she does. She's just that good. I told her in the ring, I said, well, okay, I'm officially afraid of you. That's it.
John, as I'm watching that, I'm watching with my wife. As soon as Rousey stepped over with the right leg, I said to my wife, Kelly, this fight's done. And it made me think about a conversation at Mohegan Sun on Thursday, the day before Bellator, you, Jimmy Smith, and I had. You were talking about Rousey, and you said, I don't care who you are. If she gets your arm, not that she will get your arm if you're a male fighter, but if she gets your arm, you're finished. You're not getting it back. So that immediately went through my head when she stepped over with the right leg.
And it's true. It's, there are just certain people that have, they've trained to a point and they have a certain it. and you can say that about, people's personality or anything like that. But Ronda is so good at understanding angles with that arm bar. And if you watch, where I looked at it, when I was in the cage and I said, oh, she's in trouble. When you saw Ronda wrap her arm the way she did over Kat's arm the way she did, which was, just beautiful in controlling. You saw her turn her hips. It was over. It was like, oh my God, she's done. And, obviously we're going to have to let it go because that's what we do as far as, we're going to let that professional fighter try to work their way out of it if they can. We know that they're in pain. We know that it's hurting, but, we can't stop it just based on pain. We have to stop it based upon if there's an injury, we're going to get in there and take care of them and not let it get, not let them fight with the injury. We're going to let the injury occur, which is sometimes unfortunate. We don't want that to happen, but it does. But we can't stop it in that because then they can say, I was getting out. And you're looking there waiting, thinking, and in your head, you're going, that's just not good. You're not getting out of that. And the way she sets things up and the way she transitions and everything about fighting is transitions. The ability to transition from one particular set of skills to another set, one particular technique to another. The way she sets things up, man, she is just head and shoulders above other fighters. I'm not talking about female fighters. I'm talking fighters in the way she does certain things.
John, I knew that you knew as I'm watching the fight that Zingano is done, but that was still a tough tap to see. It was a backside tap. It wasn't on the mat. It was almost like a training tap on Rousey's thigh, and yet you were right there. I know you were looking for it, but that's still, even for high-level referees, that's not an easy tap to detect.
Yeah, you've got to look for it, and you've got to realize, when the person's in trouble. And I wanted to be on the arm side that she was at. When I saw it set up, I want to be there so I can take and try to put pressure against the elbow to relieve the pressure off of Kat if it comes to the point where I see damage to the arm or if I see the tap. And so with the tap, I'm going to look towards, you're kind of taking your eyes and doing the old splay of, trying to watch one thing while you watch another. And that's part of, the difficulty sometimes of refereeing. And you've got to, get used to doing those things. Your eyes are popping back and forth and you're looking for it. And, at first I saw her hand start to go and I thought, she's going to, and she didn't. And then all of a sudden she did. And, God bless her. I felt, someone that puts in that much hard work and goes out and, makes an error, gets caught by someone really good at something, and you look and you feel so bad for her because it was like a training tap. It was almost, she got caught and she was in that position also, and she did that little tap, and it's after you think about it and you're out of the pressure of the hold, you're like, why did I do that? But it's absolutely understandable why she did. She was stuck. She was caught in a great straight arm lock. She was not going to get out of that. The only thing that was going to happen is she was going to get injured. And so, hey, she can come back and fight again. There's not a doubt in my mind somewhere along the way, she's going to fight Ronda again. And I'm sure she's going to, do a great job when she does.
Well, the night before that fight, also in Los Angeles in Invicta, Chris Cyborg defeated the Canadian Charmaine Tweet by TKO in 46 seconds. So every week here on Let's Get It On, we're going to have a poll question, our debut show, our debut poll question. Cast your vote on our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com, letsgetitonpodcast.com. Should Chris Cyborg drop down to 135 pounds to fight Ronda Rousey? Should Ronda Rousey move up to 145 pounds to accommodate Cyborg? Or should they agree to fight at the catch weight of 140 pounds? Let us know what you think. John, before you weigh in on that, let's talk about Cyborg's performance. I don't think it was surprising, but she just seems like she hits harder than ever, and she's always been a hard hitter, Cyborg.
Always, and getting better at, delivering power. It's the one thing, and you never want, it's not that you're putting anybody down, but obviously lighter weight fighters can't hit as hard as heavier weight fighters, when you're looking at the bunch of them. Obviously, you're always going to get one or two in that weight class that can deliver a lot of torque, a lot of power, and it happens, within fighters. And those are special, people. And it's not, sometimes it's a little bit developed, but a lot of it's just God given the way they do certain things. And Chris Cyborg hits like no other woman I've ever seen when it comes to MMA. She hits with power. She hurts people. You can see it, especially when you're in the ring with her and you see the reaction of the fighters. You hear the sounds that they're making off of her. The real, you look at Chris and you look at Ronda, you're looking at two completely different types of fighters. Ronda is the technical master. Technically, she just does things so well and so seamlessly. It's incredible what she does. And Chris is that just pure power monster that comes after other girls and just it hits them. And you can see in their, their body language, their demeanor of, oh my God, I have never been hit like that. And it affects them to a point where they can't recover. And it overwhelms them. And that's, part of what fighting is, your mindset and the ability to deal with things. Chris has fought some really good fighters. When she's fighting someone like a Marloes Cohn, Marloes is outstanding. She is such a good fighter and so well-versed. And you can see that she, mentally is so strong and she accepts things, but Chris just wears her down in the fights that she's had with her, to the point because of that power. And it's a power that it's just hard to deal with the longer it goes. And that's what Chris brings. She brings a strength, of a will of I'm going to run through you, compared to Ronda is that fighter that, she's not going to possibly run through you. Possibly she is. Possibly she's going to toss you. Possibly she's going to, work towards just taking you down and slipping into an armbar. You don't know she's that technical master as far as what she does. So they're two completely different fighters, and obviously two fighters that everyone would love to see. You just don't know if it's ever going to happen because they are in two different weight classes.
So what about it, John? What do you think? Is catchweight of 140, is that a decent compromise? Obviously, there's no title. Rousey is the UFC's 135 champ. Cyborg is Invicta's 145 champ. But this is a fight that really goes beyond title belts. This is just a fight that I think people from hardcores to very casual MMA fans, and maybe even people who've never followed MMA, they're just attracted to Ronda Rousey's personality or Cyborg's demeanor. They want to see that. 140 seems like a pretty good compromise to me. And, Rousey, it's kind of lost to history. Rousey won her bronze medal in judo at 152. She made her pro MMA debut at 145. Cyborg to 135. I don't know. I think you told me as we were driving to the airport to Hartford, I think you said that's like you making 170, right?
Yeah. I just look at it, let's be honest. For that fight to occur, Chris is going to end up having to be signed by the UFC. The UFC doesn't let their champions fight people that are outside of their promotion, and you can't blame them for that. That's, if you're going to fight for them, you're going to fight under their banner, under their promotion. And Chris is going to end up having to leave Invicta and go to the UFC. But the UFC and Invicta have a very, synergetic relationship. That they did that with the entire 115-pound roster that they have. Basically, came from Invicta. So, that's not the problem. The problem is Chris has got to not prove, but she's got to get to that 135-pound weight class. And Ronda can absolutely, go to 140. She could go to 145. That's Ronda's choice. But Ronda is a bantamweight champion, and bantamweight stops at 135. So why is the real question is, why is the champion going to move up to fight somebody at a weight class that the UFC doesn't even have? It doesn't make real sense when you look at it. Chris has got to, the real thing here is Chris has got to come down to the 135. And I personally don't think it's smart for Chris to do that. I think that weight cut is too much for her. I think it's going to affect her. She's a big girl. I saw a picture. She was standing on a scale the day after the Invicta. She's 175 pounds. That's 30 pounds off of the weight class she's fighting, and it's 35 pounds off of that 140 mark, if that's what you're talking about. And it's, a complete 40-pound difference from the weight class that Ronda's fighting in. So you're asking her to lose an incredible amount of weight. And I think, anything is possible, but to be done the right way, it's going to take a lot of time. She's got to change her entire nutritional system, the way she's doing things. She's going to have to eat a certain way and slowly bring herself down towards that weight if that's what she wants to do. And she's the only one that can decide if she wants to do that.
John, there's so much money on the table, and presumably if this fight gets made, the UFC could write in contracts, which is what Brock Lesnar had in his UFC contract. A fair amount of top-level UFC guys have had this, where you get a bonus based on pay-per-view buys. So would that be incentive enough for Ronda Rousey? I don't know. Does she need it? I mean, she has a lot of endorsements. You could argue that right now she is the best known fighter in our sport. If you're talking about just general population, people know who Ronda Rousey is. It's like when I was a soccer commentator, people who had never seen soccer, would never watch soccer, knew who David Beckham was. And I'm kind of sensing that Rousey is sort of moving into that category. So money aside, maybe she doesn't need it, or maybe the money is so huge where she thinks, why not?
All right, let's just take a small look at this. All right. Ronda Rousey fights Kat Zingano at UFC 184. It's at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. They sell it out. That's 2 female fighters as far as the main event, and 2 female fighters as far as the co-main event with Pennington against Holm. They sell it out. Now, I can't say what the pay-per-view is, but let's take a look at some of the people that are there to, be there for Ronda and to back Ronda. I mean, I'm looking at, she's got Vin Diesel, who she's doing movies with. Okay, there you go. She's got Victor Ortiz, the ex-welterweight champion, up in the studio watching her because she's done movies with. She's got Mark Wahlberg there. She has branched out and done so much, outside of just MMA, but it's the MMA that's got her there. Obviously, it's the way she does, what she does in our sport that has propelled her into these other arenas. But, those other arenas, she's getting big time, and she's making a lot of money doing it. And she's, just developing a huge fan base and the fame that's coming with it. Ronda doesn't have to do anything. Let's be to sit there and say, what she's going to do, I can't say. I can tell you what I would tell you is smart. If Ronda ever goes up in weight to 140 or 145, she's playing into somebody else's game. And, my dad long ago told me, never fight another man's fight. Never play another man's game. Make them play yours. And if Ronda is smart, she'll just sit there and say, hey, here's the championship belt. You want to be a champion? Come get me. Come down to this weight. And that's a game that I don't know if Chris can play successfully in losing that weight.
John, it's funny because there was this with Mike Tyson after he took out Michael Spinks in 93 seconds or 91 seconds.
91, come on.
91 seconds. 91 seconds. This is the hardcore of hardcores. This is what John and I are like. We're debating over 2 seconds, and you're right, 91 seconds, and I'm kicking myself for saying
okay.
93.
I have Gene LaBelle yelling at me in the ring. Not yelling. I love Gene. He's my man. But he's saying that, he goes, that was not 14 seconds. That was 12.7. 12.7 is what it should be.
But, with Tyson, we'll definitely get Gene on this podcast at some point. Gene's a hero, both of ours, Judo Gene. With Tyson, there was almost the fear in boxing that he was going to become too good. And it was really good for boxing. Terrible for Don King. Terrible, even worse for Mike Tyson, obviously. But it was good for boxing when 25 years ago in Tokyo, Buster Douglas shocked the world, knocked out Mike Tyson. You almost paint yourself into a corner, whether it's team sports, individual sports. When you have a champion that's not just great, it's not even competitive. And that's almost the situation the UFC is in. I guess it's a bad problem to have, but when does it become a bad problem, period, where you think, wow, who are we going to feed her next? Because she's winning, Ronda Rousey is winning fights that aren't even entertaining. They're not even competitive. And remember that with Tyson, people were saying, well, why do I want to buy this pay-per-view? Because he's going to clean this guy out in about 2 or 3 minutes.
It's a problem. And it's, you can sit there and say, well, if you're going to have a problem, it's a good problem to have. But, the fight that they made with Kat Zingano, I mean, I thought they promoted it, beautifully. It's, she's an undefeated fighter. She has shown such heart, determination in her fights, and has come back from adversity in so many ways. Is such a good, role model for our sport, along with Ronda. I think Ronda, actually came out, she doesn't usually say a whole lot, about her fighter, her opponents, unless she doesn't like them, and, talked great things about Kat because she took her serious. She knew this was a serious threat. And the fight ends up being, a couple of seconds long. You can't be you can be disappointed with the length of it. You can be disappointed I didn't get to see more, but you can't be disappointed with what you saw because what you saw was freaking art. It was beautiful. It was as good as it gets as far as what we truly do in mixed martial arts and what the martial arts is about. It was everything. And so the UFC is, you look and I'm sure they've thought about it. Dana says, I'm going to have to have her fight men. Obviously she's not going to fight men, but they're going to have to work at building other people. You've got Beth Correa, who's got an undefeated record. She is a really good fighter. I've done her fights. Do I think she's ready for Ronda? In certain elements, I think she is. In certain elements, I don't think anyone is ready for the level that Ronda brings to the grappling game, the way she goes at it, because she goes at it in a different fashion than you will see with the normal jiu-jitsu player. In jiu-jitsu, we talk about, being relaxed and taking your time, and that's part of the game. And it's inbred to every student as they start. And she doesn't play that game. She goes about jiu-jitsu with, her judo background like a Dan Gable type of wrestler. She goes and attacks you. She goes after it. She doesn't wait. And the pressure that she brings is immense. And if you're, caught by it, it can overwhelm you. And that's what's been happening. So they're going to have a hard time finding, that opponent to a point. There's all kinds of girls out there. And the more, people are seeing of Ronda Rousey, the more girls are coming to our sport. And there's always going to be someone out there. There's always going to be that person. And there's absolutely, the challenge of seeing if Chris Cyborg, wants to try to make it to 135. But, there are great girls out there. The thing is, yes, Ronda's beaten most of them. Sarah McMahon is a phenomenal wrestler. She's a phenomenal MMA fighter. She's getting better all the time. And that will still be a good fight when it comes back. It's just that people are going to say, well, Ronda knocked her out in the first, 45 seconds of the fight. Why am I going to see that again? And that's where, the problem of promotion comes in. But, Dana White and the UFC is a promotional machine. Dana can sell ice to Eskimos, man. He's good at it. Okay. People can say what they want. They can like him, not like him. That's perceptions and that's their opinion. But you've got to compliment the man as he is one of the greatest promoters that has ever lived. And that's saying a lot because there's been some great promoters, but look at what he's done. And he's been able to get people to buy into certain things. And every time that they think that he's full of shit, the fight that he's talking about turns out to be an incredible fight. So you know what? He'll be able to do it. It's just that she's not making life easy on him.
John, I guess my last point on Ronda Rousey before we move on to our other topics on the program, we talked about the co-main event. Holly Holm, great boxing credentials. We had her for one fight in Bellator, but there's no buzz on Holly Holm. All of the buzz right now online, from the journalists all the way down to the bloggers to the hardcore fans on the underground forums, are talking about Chris Cyborg. There's not that outcry of Holly Holm. Had Holly Holm won in a squash, maybe you would see a little bit of heat on that fight, but you're not seeing that at all.
No, and it personally, the way I look at it, I thought the fight that Holly had with Raquel was exactly what she needed. It was the type of fight she needed coming into the UFC because, it's so hard to explain to people the amount of pressure on these fighters when, especially someone like Holly coming from, she hasn't, you can sit there and say what you want about, how much Holly has fought in boxing or in MMA. And she has fought a lot of fights, but the venues and the amount of people and just the promotional attraction and the pressure that comes with stepping into what she had with that fight at UFC 184, we're talking about it. It's a huge leap, and she has to deal with it. And you can see, the fighters, and you can see them tensing up, and you can see when they're just not, taking that pressure and letting it go. They're holding on to it, and they're letting it affect them. And so the best thing that could have happened, in my opinion, to Holly Holm was having that, really good 3-round scrap with Raquel Pennington. I thought it was a good fight. I thought she showed herself very well. She was resilient. She did a great job of stopping takedowns. She showed a lot of varying techniques. She showed, everything in the stand-up game you'd want to see. There was no ground game, with it, and that's fine. That's obviously the kind of game that she wants to play. And again, I don't think there's any girl, no matter what she did, if she did go on the ground with, Pennington, and there was some ground game in there, it's not going to change anyone's opinion on what her abilities are going to be against a Ronda Rousey on the ground. We're talking about two different fighters. The question is, can someone like a Holly Holm stay on her feet against a Ronda Rousey and make Ronda fight more of the fight Holly wants instead of Ronda dictating? And again, you want to make the other person fight your fight, make them play your game. The problem is no one has been able to do that with Ronda Rousey.
That's Big John McCarthy. I'm Sean Wheelock. You're with us for the premiere edition of Let's Get It On, our weekly podcast as we look inside MMA and combat sports. On this podcast, we want to hear from you. Submit your questions. Info at letsgetitonpodcast.com. That's info at letsgetitonpodcast.com. And as most of you know who have watched me call fights, I am completely obsessed with saying names correctly. So please include instructions on pronunciation. All right, John, our first question comes from Susan Walker, who writes, can you guys please explain what out-of-competition testing versus in-competition testing actually means? I always thought that once you signed your name to the contract, it would then be considered in-competition testing.
Oh, my God. Why does she make life so hard on me from the very beginning? Okay. Well, Susan, here's the real problem. Every athletic commission is basically doing their drug testing under different criteria. Every athletic commission itself is a regulatory body unto itself. They don't follow what other athletic commissions do. They write up their legislation. They write up what they're going to go. It goes through the government if it is a state regulatory body, or it goes through a tribal commission, and they can actually change things much easier on a tribal commission. But they come up with what is their criteria for testing. But if you're going to look, there's so many different types of testing criteria. You've got WADA, you've got VADA, being the World Anti-Doping Agency or the Voluntary Anti-Doping Agency. They have their criteria. And if anyone's going to say what's the most stringent, they're going to probably say WADA, being the World Anti-Doping Agency, is the most stringent. That is the one that covers the Olympics. That is the one that most people would look at as the actual system. If you wanted to be as stringent as possible, you're going to follow their system. That is what Nevada follows. And, Nevada gets caught in situations where people are upset with them when all they're doing is saying that they have set up their legislation to follow the WADA guidelines for anti-doping. And the guidelines for WADA, as far as competition and out of competition, is a pretty simple system in that competition testing is done within 12 hours of the athlete's time of competition. Now that 12 hours, you can figure if they're going to, run a race, fight a fight, play a game, tennis, whatever it's going to be. We'll say that they're doing it at 3:00 in the afternoon. That means that you can test them up to 12 hours before that actual competition, or up to 12 hours after. So it's really like a 24-hour window that you can test them for in-competition testing. That in-competition testing is going to create certain criteria as far as all kinds of prohibited substances. Marijuana would be prohibited, even some types of anti-inflammatories, things like that. There's all kinds of things that are on the list that the athlete needs to understand. I cannot take any of these things. And they need to list everything that they have put in their body as far as that could be, possibly coming up on a blood test. It needs to be put on a list that I took this at this time, I took this at this time, and you're basically giving all this information out to the doctor that's going to be there, or the phlebotomist that's going to be taking your blood, telling them this is what I took. And that 12 hours of competition is that area where if you are caught with something, that's in competition testing. Anything outside of that is out of competition testing. And that's where the drugs that are allowed and what they're looking for is different. And a lot of people are going to bring up, like John Jones and, the metabolite for cocaine that was caught in his system through basically a WADA type test. And the problem is WADA can't simply sit there and say, you can't ever have that metabolite in your system, because what you're looking at is they're not grabbing a hold of the exact type of drug someone's using. Again, they're grabbing a hold of the metabolite that is part of that narcotic. And when it comes to cocaine is obviously something that's illegal in countries around the world, but there's all kinds of things that are used that have the same metabolite. Novocaine for your dentist when he's going to do something and drill a tooth, he's going to put Novocaine in your mouth. You're going to end up with that metabolite in your system. Lidocaine. We'll say a fighter is training and they get cut and they go to the doctor and the doctor puts lidocaine in that cut to stitch it up. You can end up with that same metabolite in your system. And so they can't automatically sit there and say, well, out of competition, this is an illegal drug, you can't do something. They're going to look into it. Out of competition testing is different. The real question is when you're looking at this out of competition testing, the athlete needs to be they have to be licensed by the athletic commission for the athletic commission to test them. Or they have to be applying for a license and the commission says, okay, well, to apply for the license, we need you to come in and we're going to drug test you, but they've got to give them a time that they're going to do it, And this is where there's legalities where lawyers will come and say, well, my client is not licensed and you're trying to test them. And you can't do that because they're not under your, purview of being able to control what they're doing. And it's a real legality in all kinds of things that people don't understand. But out of competition testing, anything basically within 12 hours either side of the competition, in competition, anything within that 12 hours, both sides of that competition for the fighter or any athlete.
Next up, John.
I went on too long.
No, that was outstanding. Very thorough. Next up, Tito Guadarrama and Hill pronunciation guide. So I think I nailed that. We'll see. He asked, what do you guys think about boxing coming back to free TV on NBC, CBS, and Spike? Of course, referring to PBC, Al Heyman's new series, which is pretty revolutionary in the sport.
Yeah, you look at what, Al Heyman is someone that people, if they know who he is, we're talking about a music guy. And he's always had this love for boxing, wanted to be part of boxing, got into it. And you see other music, guys doing it. You see, Jay-Z doing it. Hammer, has become the agent for a lot of fighters and stuff. So, that crossover between the fight game and musicians and the music industry, it's a pretty close, group. But what Al Heyman is doing with this, I think what all right, I'm guessing because I don't talk to Al, but Al Heyman is a smart enough entertainer, a smart enough businessman to understand that boxing is the father sport. It's the older man's sport. It's a sport of a older generation that is slowly, and I hate to say it, in any way, they're dying off. Doesn't mean that boxing is dying off, but they need to start promoting and producing boxing shows in a way that catches the eye of the younger, fan out there. They've got to start bringing the young male audience, that 18 to 34 demographic back.
The MMA audience, John. It's
Absolutely.
the MMA audience.
Yeah, it's really what you're looking at. And they, you need to get them interested in what's happening in boxing. So I think that they're looking at, hey, how do we get some different aspect to boxing? Boxing is a phenomenal sport, and it's got great athletes in it, and they put on great shows. And how do we bring people to it? And this is a guy that's starting to look outside of the box, not do things in the standard way that has been done over the last basics half century of this is a boxing show and this is how we're going to do it. And things are he's going to try to change it up and he's going to try to make it more entertaining for the fans. He's going to try to make it more entertaining for the fans that are at the show and more entertaining for fans that are watching on TV, because he's going to be giving them more information about what's going on than they've ever gotten before. And you look at it and, hey, the way to shake things up is to step outside of the box and say, you know what, I'm going to be the guy that, makes the changes. Now, when you do that, You can be the guy that everyone sits there and says, man, that dude's a genius. Or everyone can sit there at the end as the Monday morning quarterback and say, oh, he's an idiot. Everyone knew he shouldn't do that. But you've got to have someone step up, and Al Heyman's the guy that's doing it. And, best of luck to him, because anything that brings more eyes on boxing is great for the sport. It's great for the fighters. It's great for the industry, and I hope it happens.
Remember, give us your questions every week. Email us, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Still to come on this week's program, we will talk about the win in Bellator for the undefeated Englishman Liam McGary, taking Bellator's light heavyweight world title over the then champion Emmanuel Newton. It's put a lot of the focus on the judging in that fight. And we'll also revisit last Saturday's UFC bout, Kid Yamamoto versus Roman Salazar. The fun never ends for Big John. 3 eye pokes ruled a no contest. With John McCarthy, I'm Sean Wheelock. This is Let's Get It On. It's the book that Wrestling Observer calls a must-read for any MMA fan. Jonathan Snowden of Bleacher Report describes as riveting and amazing, and TheFightNerd.com says nothing is held back. Pick this book up right away. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, written by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by John McCarthy, is now available to listeners of this podcast at the special price of $12.48. That's far less than you'll pay for the book on Amazon and half price of what you'll pay in store at Barnes & Noble. Buy it directly from the publisher now online at ascendbooks.com and enter the promo code LEGAL50. That's ASCEND books.com, promo code LEGAL50. Learn the true story of how the UFC came into existence in the book that Randy Couture describes as honest, shocking, and enthralling, and that has a rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars from Amazon Reader Reviews. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by Big John McCarthy. Available now online at ascendbooks.com for just $12.48 when you use the promo code LEGAL50.
Now, back to Let's Get It On with your hosts, Sean Wheelock and Big John McCarthy.
Last Friday at Bellator, a jam-packed Mohegan Sun, Uncasville, Connecticut. Main event, Liam McGary defeated the defending champion Emmanuel Newton by unanimous decision to claim Bellator's light heavyweight world title. The judges' scores were 48-46, 48-47, and 48-47. John, it was a great fight, and it's one of the best first rounds that I've ever commentated my entire career. But there's been a lot of discussion on the scoring of the fight, and John, I think it's largely because McGary spent a significant portion of the 25 minutes on his back attacking with submissions.
Yeah, what's really amazing is, and it's I guess it's not amazing, it's normal, is that most people do not understand how an MMA fight is judged, what we give credit to, what we do not. And they get this idea that because Emmanuel Newton gets out of a submission, give him credit. What a great job. And you know what? That you're right. It's a great job that he got out of the submission, but he gets 0 on the scorecard for getting out of the trouble that he was put in by Liam McGary. McGary is attacking. He gets credit for that. Emmanuel Newton is defending. He's getting caught in submissions. He's having to try to work his way out of, and what he gets for getting out of the submission is the right to continue on in the fight, but he gets nothing in the eyes of the judges. The only thing he gets credit for are offensive maneuvers. And when you have a guy putting a submission on, Liam is the guy that is doing the offensive technique. The defensive actions of Emmanuel Newton to get out gives him no credit on the scorecards of the judges. I want, and everyone gets confused about this is what makes MMA judging difficult, is when you look at boxing, kickboxing, the judges are going off of effect. Did the punch land? Did the kick land in a legal striking area? As long as it did, how much effect do they believe it had on the fighter? Did it cause the fighter to back off? Did it cause the fighter to readjust their game? Did it cause the fighter to give some sign that hurt? And you'll see fighters all the time, they get hit and they'll sit there and they smile and shake their head. Well, in most judges' eyes, when they're doing that, they're going, oh, that hurt them. And because it did, that's why they're doing it. It just happens, you tend to do that. But the judges are giving credit for effect. What happens in MMA that makes MMA judging incredibly difficult is they're doing that exact same thing with all the striking. Legal areas, effect. How much effect is it having? How hard of a shot was it? How much damage do they believe it did to the fighter that received it? They're going through all of that. But then they're also going through having to basically judge a submission attempt that does not work and equate a value to it in how was it put on? Was it put on in a true fashion that it could have been successful? How much work did the fighter who it was placed on have to do to defend against it and work their way out of it? And then they've got to give a quantitative value to that lost submission attempt, which makes judging incredibly difficult. As a referee, I try to help the judges when, I have a submission attempt. You're going to see if I'm refereeing and a guy's putting a submission attempt on and I'm just standing up straight and I'm not doing anything, I'm not getting down close to it, I'm telling the judges it's not on good. He does it. This is not close. It is not a submission that you want to give a lot of credit to. But when you see me all of a sudden getting down, crouched down close to it, it's telling the judges, hey, it's on tight. This is good. Now the guy gets out, the girl gets out, that's fine. But at least the judge has an idea, oh, it was on tight. If they can't see it based upon the position that they're in, I try to help them with that. But when you're, it's crazy that people look at saying, but he defended against it, he got out of it. It would be the same as if, you and I are fighting, Sean, and you know what? You are just moving around and you're picking me apart and you throw this right.
That would be my
overhand.
only chance, John, moving around and picking you apart. I'm not standing in the pocket.
There you go, baby. I like that. But you throw this right overhand that just frickin' cracks the frickin' left side of my face. My head twists all the way as far as it can. And I turn my head back at you and I give a little, and I start walking forward. Now, you just landed a punch on me. You landed a clean punch on me. I did nothing. And so it would be, this is where, let's have the judge not so much give credit. Yeah, they'll give some credit to you. You landed a clean blow. Boy, John's got a great chin. Boy, I'm going to give him credit for it. That's nuts. You don't give credit for defense. You don't give credit for a good chin. You give credit to offensive techniques. And that's what the judges were doing that night in Connecticut.
And John, I think the equivalent, a grounded fighter, a fighter who's attacking on the bottom, it's almost the same with certain judges, certain fans who don't like a fighter in the stand-up who's moving backwards, who's on his bike. You can have the more effective striking with backwards and lateral movement. You can have the more effective grappling with your bottom game. And I think we saw that with McGary, but I understand a lot of people thought, wow, if you look at top position, it was dominated by Emmanuel Newton. If you look at submission attempts, it was overwhelmingly dominated from the bottom by McGary.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and this is where I don't care if you're on top. I'm not going to sit here and lie and tell somebody, hey, as an MMA fighter, I want to be on the bottom. Nope. MMA is not jujitsu. If it's jujitsu, hey, I'll take the bottom position because as long as I do not let you pass my guard, I have all the tools. You don't have many. And I can attack you. And I can't be punched. I can't be elbowed. I'm in a good position. But that's jujitsu. That's not MMA. And I'm going to be honest and say, look, there's no fighter. If given the opportunity, you say, I can put you on top of your opponent or I can put you underneath. Which one will you take? Every one of them is going to take the top position because they know that they have the ability to hit with more power. They have the ability to move to better positions to help dominate their opponent in a way that they can inflict damage and not truly be damaged in return. That's MMA. So when you sit there and you look and you say, well, Newton is in the best position. He is, no doubt about it. But even though he's in that position, he's being controlled and dominated in the action by a guy who's on his back. Liam was using his legs beautifully. He was creating distance when he wanted to. He was sucking Emmanuel in when he wanted to. He was throwing up that triangle, so many times. And a couple of times, look, I'm going to tell you right now, I think it was the third round, he gets in that topside triangle. There's no way Emmanuel's getting out. He's stuck and the bell rings. And, you look and that's just part of fighting. And that's, hey, we go on 5-minute rounds and that's just the way it is. But there was times when you looked and Liam did everything he needed to do to get an end in that fight. He was creating exactly what we want a guy on the bottom to do. Fighters have choices. And when we're talking to them, even about rules in the back, we're not talking so much about, don't do this. Don't grab the clavicle. Don't heel kick to the kidney. Don't stomp the foot if the person's hand's on the ground because that's a grounded point. Look at the fighters understand the rules. We will go over anything they want to go over as far as rules, fouls, any of that. But we talk about bout conduct. And one of the things we talk about is, if they take the fight to the ground. And if you take the fight to the ground, I expect you to work. I expect you to show me what you're going after. I'm not here to tell you how to fight, but I want you, if you're going after strikes, then go after them. Show me that you're trying to do damage to your opponent to bring an end to the fight. If you're going after positions for submissions, I will see your setup. I will see what you're doing. I will give you time. I don't care if the crowd wants you up. As long as I see that you are moving in a way that, yes, you can go after that submission, I'm going to let you go. If you get underneath your opponent and you decide that you want to become a defensive fighter and close your guard and hold on to him, that's great. You can do that to defend yourself, but you're never going to ever get the referee to stand you up because you're the fighter that is stalling the fight. Well, Liam McGary is doing exactly what we asked them to do. He's opening his guard so Newton can move. Now, there's times when he closed it, but he's opening it a lot, and he's attacking. He's going after his opponent. He's putting his opponent in dangerous positions, and he's controlling the actual position of the fight. Everything is about angles, and when they're head up straight on, you know what? Emmanuel's got the advantage. But when you see that angle change and you see, Emmanuel's head is not centered on Liam's head and he's stuck in that triangle, he's got problems. He knows he's got problems and he's trying to work his way out of the problems, and that's what the judges were seeing.
Liam McGary, aside from all of this, I think it's undeniable that he is one of the next true breakout stars. If he's not broken out already, he's a Bellator world champion.
That was a pretty good breakout right there, dude.
Unbelievable. And he gets it. He understands how to turn up the heat for a fight, but he's humble. He's nice. Obviously, my wife, Kelly, and she's English. And I have a tendency to, maybe because I speak British English, to hit it off with the English fighters. His first fight in Bellator, we hit it off right away. There's no arrogance. There's no cockiness about him. And I know when his hand was raised, a lot of people judged his reaction thinking, wow, he thought he lost that fight. I think it was just almost the humbleness of his true character. This is amazing. Wow, look at what's happened to me. Emmanuel Newton has been a phenomenal champion, showed great heart, great determination. If nothing else, John, this just further shows the depth of Bellator, the entire fight roster, and at 205 pounds.
Oh, yeah. Look, Emmanuel is as nice a guy as you will ever run into. He's such a good guy. And you know what? He's such a good fighter. He's awkward, and awkward creates problems, man. He is a handful to deal with because he comes at you at odd angles. He does things that you don't expect at times. He's just, it doesn't mean he's weird, as far as, he can't do things. He can do everything. He just does it sometimes in an awkward fashion or awkward angle that you don't expect to do something from. So he has proven his resiliency and, again, his heart by some of the fights that he's had. He has no quit in him. You got to love, Emmanuel Newton and the way he goes about just being determined, keep on moving forward, and just he wears guys out physically and mentally. And that was what really impressed me as far as Liam McGary in the fight, because, man, when you put guys in these holes and they keep getting out, it wears on you because those holds are working with every other guy that you're rolling with, every other guy that you're ending up fighting. It's been working. And all of a sudden, I am in a fight with a guy, it's not working. And you start to doubt. You start to have doubt. You start to say, what is wrong? This guy won't tap. All of a sudden, he's superhuman. And these thoughts are going through your head. And you really got to give credit. Liam continued to do what he was doing throughout the fight. That was impressive. Liam McGary is a guy, when you're looking at the prototypical now 205 fighter, he's it. Look at him. Look at John Jones. We're talking Liam's 6'6",
right?
205 pounds,
With
lean,
no desire
strong,
to move to heavyweight, by the way, John.
and
He said, I'm
shouldn't
a
do it.
205er.
There's no reason for him to. He's long, and that long frame creates problems. It creates huge problems for people. And, with as active as he is off of his back, that creates problems because now guys are sitting there saying, I don't know if I want to take him down because I'm going to have problems with this guy. He creates angles and problems on the ground that sometimes it's going to be difficult for me to work through. So you look at it, he's going to be a great representative from England, the first MMA true champion. If you're going to look at saying, in the big leagues, he's the guy that's the first true champion in any of the organizations. And he's a great representative in everything that he does. He's funny. He's humble. He's also brash. And he comes out to fight. And that's what you got to love about him. Every fight that I've seen that guy in, I've never seen him in a boring fight. That says something about who he is.
So we talked about the judging in that fight. Let's go back to refereeing, John. And you were right where you do not want to be, and that's in the center of things. So in addition, on Saturday night in Los Angeles on the UFC card for you refereeing the main event, Ronda Rousey defeating Cat Zingano, you refereed a fight on the undercard that I was really excited to see. I know a lot of hardcores were excited. The return of Kid Yamamoto taking on Roman Salazar. 3 eye pokes in the fight, all of which you ruled to be accidental. John, truthfully, I think you gave a master class on how to do eye poke procedure. And on the third eye poke, second suffered by Salazar, you were forced to rule a no contest. I know you never want to do that. I know you want to be invisible in fights. It was just one of those fights, and you could really see it from the first eye poke. It was not going to go the way that everybody was hoping.
Yeah, styles make fights, and sometimes the way both guys interact just leads towards certain things. And when it came to the eye poke with Yamamoto, what Yamamoto was doing is he's actually backing off with his hand out, and Roman's coming forward, and Roman runs into his hand. Now his hand's out there, but as a fighter, you're not sitting there he's not trying to poke him in the eyes. That's not what's going on. This is just reactionary. Your hand goes out to avoid as you're moving back. And it happens. And, and when the last one, what happened with Roman, I saw it, and he says, I saw it hit him, saw his face go into Yamamoto's hands. And so, said, stop, and brought him over side. And, he says, oh, you got me right in the eyes. I said, yeah, I know, I saw it. I go, that's just part of what we have here. I think I cussed. I was bad, but
yeah. And Fox Sports 1 missed the bleep. They were about 3 seconds late. We had a big laugh on that at home.
Yeah, my mama didn't raise me right, but it's the whole thing is what's really funny about the whole situation is my whole thing is I want to give the fighter some time, because look at when you get poked and when you're seeing blurry. It's driving you nuts because you're trying to get your eye back. You're trying to get that clear vision, and that's all I want. And the funny part is, everyone's going to take and perceive things a certain way. There's people perceiving that I was trying to force a guy that was saying he couldn't see back into the fight, and I'm like,
and I don't know. I don't know where that would come from. That's the polar opposite of what you were doing.
Exactly. My whole thing is he was actually trying to get himself back into the fight when he couldn't see. And I didn't want him to do that. I wanted him to understand, look, and the reason I'm saying is, I can see his eye. He can't see it. I can see what he's got, not so much physical damage that I can see as far as a scratch or anything like that. But Roman's eye is bouncing. He's trying to look through it, and it's doing a quiver, and it's bouncing back and forth, almost what we call a nystagmus. And it's, that's not normal. And it's telling me there's damage, and I brought the doctor in, Diego was the doctor that came in. I thought he did a phenomenal job of just taking time, looking at it. He came to me and said, hey, he says, what we're seeing with that, his orbital is starting to shake the way it is. He goes, that's presenting a problem. I'm going to see if a little bit of time will help correct it. If it doesn't, we can't let him fight. And I said, that's no problem. And our whole thing was to try to give him time, because it wasn't anything that either fighter did intentionally. And the whole thing is to try to let them come back and do the fight, give the fans the fight that hopefully, is going to be a good fight that they paid for. And in the end, it couldn't happen. And Roman was really trying to get himself back into a fight as a one-eyed fighter. And that's what I was trying to get him to say, can you fight? Can you see? And he's trying to say, yeah, no, I want you to answer my question.
Yeah, you said yes or no.
Yeah, and yes or no. Can you actually fight? And that's what I'm trying to get out of. Is this a situation that you feel comfortable going back in and fighting under? And eventually he says, I just can't see it. Exactly. Fight's over. And I don't want him to go back out in a depreciated value as far as his vision, and never want to put a fighter back out if he can't see. And so, it comes to the point where, in my opinion, there was no fault on either fighter. Roman's the guy coming forward that stuck his face in there. Yamamoto's the guy going backward, and his hand was out, yes, and he's the one that poked him, but he didn't intend to do it. And since it was in the second round where it was at, we have no option of anything other than, hey, that's a no contest. Now, if that had happened in the third round and the fight couldn't go on, at that moment when I called off the fight, I would be going to the judges and telling them, I want you to score the portion of this round that you just saw. And
which is a technical decision, which when you hear a technical decision, that's a technical decision.
Exactly. And, unfortunately, we couldn't get to that because of the round. And so it ends up being a no contest. And hey, that's great. Let them book the fight again. Let them come back and do it again if they want. But let's not have a fighter go out there and fight when he cannot see.
John, the last point on this, because I think of the vagaries of the unified rules of MMA under the ABC, 5 minutes, a hard 5 minutes on the timeout clock kept by the scorekeeper or the timekeeper, cage side or ringside, on a low blow, on a groin shot. But under the unified rules, it's a quote unquote reasonable amount of time. So as a referee, what to you in that situation is a reasonable amount of time? Because that's obviously wide open to interpretation.
Well, when you're talking about a groin shot, you're talking about something different than any other type of foul that we have. Because if we have a groin shot, the time is actually given to the fighter. The fighter is in control of how much time they take. Meaning that if I stop it based upon a low blow and I put the fighters in the corner and I sit there, and even if I don't think that it was that serious of a blow, I cannot make the fighter go out until they say, okay, I'm ready. Now, I know that sounds kind of mean that, I would do that. But what we're talking about is the fighter can sit there and he stretches and I say, okay, are you ready to go? And he can look at me, nope. I say, okay. And then the fighter can go down and start doing push-ups. And he's doing, 25 push-ups. And I said, hey, are you ready to go? And he can look up at me and go, no. And I cannot sit there and say, look, you're doing push-ups, you can fight. Okay. He is in control of the time. Any other foul that occurs, I'm in control of the time. I'm in control of the time along with the ringside physician. And now I'm not going to sit there and make somebody fight if I don't think that they can fight or if they're not ready to fight. But if a fighter gets, we'll say hit with, an illegal blow, they get hit with an illegal elbow, we'll say, on the top of the head. All right. And I stop the fight and I, put the fighters to different corners and I end up going to him and he's going, ow, 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 ow. And I said, look, it didn't hit you real hard. I'll give you some time. I want you to, collect yourself. And because it hit him in the head, I'm going to probably bring in the ringside physician and have the ringside physician make sure that he is not concussed in a way where he can't go on in the fight. And the ringside physician is going to come in and talk to him. And the guy's going to answer, the questions, and he can still say, ow, ow, ow. It doesn't matter. And the ringside physician is going to make a determination based upon the person's gait, their pupil reactions, things like that. Is he concussed? So if he's not concussed and if the doctor feels that he can go on, the ringside physician is going to look at me and say, he's okay, he can fight. Well, as soon as he says that, I don't have a choice and the fighter doesn't have a choice. The fight is going to continue at that time and there is no more time that's going to be given to the fighter. The fighter can sit there and say, I need 30 more seconds. And I will say, nope. You want to fight? Tell me now. You want out? Tell me now. And what his choice is, if he says, well, I need more time, fight is over. You just lost on a technical knockout. That's what people don't understand. Once the ringside physician says this person is physically capable of fighting, they must continue on in the fight at that time. As the referee, I cannot give him any more time. So how much time is used is dependent upon what we have, what we're seeing, and what information we're given. And then once that ringside physician says he can go on, the fight goes on.
Big John and I are back with you next week for a new episode of Let's Get It On, first available on Friday. Download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. You can also find us on social media, facebook.com/letsgetitonpodcast, and on Twitter @podcastmma for this show, and for us personally, @John McCarthy MMA and @Sean Wheelock. To ask us a question, make a comment, or inquire about becoming a sponsor of Let's Get It On, email us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Again, that's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. For Big John McCarthy and our producer Chris Lakin, I'm Sean Wheelock. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been a presentation of Ignotainment Media Network, online at ignotainment.com.
Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock, only on the Ignotainment Media Network. Don't forget to leave a rating and review in the comments section of the iTunes Podcast Store. If you have questions, comments, or are interested in sponsoring the show, contact us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, or check out our additional lineup of podcasts, including Ocho Man, Behind the Eight Ball, The Whiskey Philosopher, and Youth Baseball Talk at ignotainment.com.